What are the dangers if you speak out against the Zionist state? Well, they're very real. And no more has that become more crystal clear than in what just happened with the New York Times op-ed writer Nicholas Kristof writing about the systemic rape and violence of prisoners, mostly civilians. In fact, I would imagine pretty much all of them are. And just the outright crimes against humanity that the state of Israel commits on a regular basis. And by doing so, there is this complete denial of reality that those that support the Zionist state are enacting on a regular basis. Colin, Netanyahu made this statement. And so he said, and I quote, "Today, I instructed my legal advisors to consider the harshest legal action against the New York Times and Nicholas Kristof. They defamed the soldiers of Israel and perpetuated a blood libel, again, blood libel, about rape, trying to create a false symmetry between the genocidal terrorists of Hamas and Israel's valiant soldiers. Under my leadership, Israel will not be silent. We will fight these lies in the court of public opinion and in the court of law. Truth will prevail." Now, again, who is Netanyahu Milikowski to attempt to do anything in our country when it comes to this problem? Because, again, this is the United States of America. This is not Israel. We have laws here protecting free speech. And, of course, you would think anybody who's going to make a statement like that would have their language defended. But here's the problem. This is why we say people that support Israel are really Israel first. This is outside the New York Times yesterday afternoon. As you can see, the truth doesn't matter. Frankly, they don't want to know the truth. Guys, if you haven't smashed that like button yet, please make sure you do so. As you can see, every live stream, we continue to get heavily suppressed. We should be at over 600 live stream viewers now. We're stuck in the low 400s. So anything you could do to help to try to hit that algorithm would be tremendously appreciated. And as you can see, if you look in closely, it says end Jew hatred. Now, the only reason anybody would put that up there is because there is no distinction. There is no difference. Judaism and Zionism in their mind is the same thing. And that is why we have to continue fighting on this front line of making sure that people understand that this ideology is genocidal, not just to the Palestinians, but for the entire world. We show you constantly the beyond inappropriate behavior of the average Zionist. Mind-numbingly scary how insane they are and how they treat people. And we're going to get to Jerusalem Day very shortly. But this is exactly where the problem lies. They don't want to know about the crimes that the Zionists are committing because they don't see Palestinians or frankly anybody else as the same as them in terms of humanity. They see them as subhuman, so they can be eliminated for their peace of mind and safety. That's why they're doing this. Because they know if the New York Times is starting to cover this type of behavior, who in the fuck else are they going to turn to? They really don't have anybody. They're really driving themselves into a corner. The New York Times is the most pro-war publication, national publication, corporate special interest publication in the country. And they allowed somebody to get this story through. That's why this is such a big deal. Notice anything unique about these individuals who are standing there and protesting? They all look like they're from the North Shore of Long Island, and they're all Ashkenazi. There is no one there that looks any different. And so now I want to draw your attention. And listen, hats off. I mean, really, truly, hats off to Nicholas Kristof, who stood up to write this. And Colin, I believe I sent you something on Nicholas. I wanted to read his, and then I want to obviously read the op-ed that I put together. So we've got two things that I want to highlight here. And let's see. Okay. So let me pull this one out first, and then put this up there. So Nicholas Kristof put in a response because I think he felt he had to, probably because there's been a lot of violence directed at him for even attempting to go down this road and saying what needed to be said. This is also in large part why there has been an exceptional amount of pushback, including reports coming out of CBS News, which of course is controlled by the Ellisons. This report now that I think a lot of you have probably been seeing that, oh, by the way, you know all those stories we told you about what actually happened, what really happened on October 7th? Yeah, they're all true. Yeah, all this stuff that Kristof says, yeah, it's all a lie. But what we said about October 7th, yeah, that's all true. So here's what Nicholas Kristof had to say. This was a hard article to write, and it's a hard article to read, but I hope you'll do so. I've been reporting in the West Bank on rape and other sexual violence of Palestinian male and female prisoners by Israel's authorities, and I find that it's widespread. As one Israeli lawyer told me, the authorities grant permission to rape. Permission to rape. Israeli authorities deny that. The article is now published. The assault victims were warned not to give or speak of what they endured. They were sometimes told they would be killed or raped again if they gave interviews, but they reluctantly did so. I'm very grateful to them for their courage. One man described being raped 3 times in a single day in Israeli prison. The third time after he tried to protest, a young woman said the guards would come in at the beginning of each shift and strip her naked and abuse her. Another reported that she was shown photos of herself being raped and warned they would be released unless she cooperated with Israeli intelligence. Look, whatever our position on the Middle East, we should be able to agree on being anti-rape. Sexual assaults were horrific when Israeli women were targeted on October 7th. Again, parsing the language, being very diplomatic about it. And they're equally horrific when Israeli authorities use them against Palestinians day after day after day. We should be able to find common ground in opposing rape. No, we have seen clip after clip after clip of IDF soldiers, former IDF soldiers, Israeli diplomats, supporters of the state of Israel, all universally saying rape is acceptable. It's war. We can do what war, it's acceptable behavior because they're subhuman. We're dealing with subhuman people, even though the Israelis are the real subhuman people. But this is what they're allowed to do. And so it is in defense of that. And the only reason why Kristof is out here making this statement in defense of his journalism, why do you think? Can you even imagine how many death threats this guy has gotten over the last 24 to 48 hours? How people have been telling him, we're coming for you, and we're going to put your head on a spigot. I guarantee you he's been dealing with it nonstop. He probably has to have security detailed just for writing this. Well, Colin, if you would, please pull up what I wrote earlier today. This is what I wrote in response and why we have to keep perspective on this. Very important. I don't know where you're starting it from. Can you go to the top? Okay, thank you. Netanyahu sues New York Times over truth. That is not the, okay. That is not the top of the story, Colin. I don't know why you're saying, but if one reason stands above all others, there is another line that was above that, and I don't know why I'm not seeing it. Anyway, let me, yeah. I don't know if it, yeah. What I said, and again, I don't know why it's not there, but what I did say is that there are many reasons why the state of Israel is allowed to act with impunity against our country, why they are allowed to conduct business in the capacity that they are able to do it in. And I am sending the line to you now, Colin, because I know I sent it, so I want you to have it. There are many reasons why Israel and its relentless lobby of Zionist minions have been able to wreak havoc with almost complete impunity over our country for multiple generations. But if one reason stands above all others, it is the power of the purse. The threat of financial ruin has been Israel's most effective fail-safe. Colin? Has been the most effective fail-safe weapon, keeping many prominent voices in line despite a globally televised genocide of the Palestinians that is almost assuredly morphing into a genocide of West Asia for the Greater Israel Project. So when Prime Minister Netanyahu declares that Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times will be sued for blood libel after his most recent op-ed, it is yet another warning shot to any individual who dares to speak out against the Zionist state, much less expose its crimes against humanity. In this case, Kristof's op-ed exposed the systemic rape committed by the IDF against prisoners. The reaction from Israel and its lobby has been swift and brutal. Not only has Kristof's op-ed been condemned as blasphemous and dishonest by the Israel lobby, but now we are seeing the fabricated Hamas rape stories from October 7th, 2023 resurface widely as a countermeasure. All this suggests is that Kristof's expose is completely valid, and Israel's craven nature exemplifies its demonstrable guilt. I've personally paid the price economically, socially, and politically for speaking out against the Zionist state since day one. I lost my job and several clients. The police harassed me, and voicing my convictions severely severed friendships and familial relationships forever. And in the end, I would do it all over again because it was the right thing to do. I have no doubt that Kristof felt the same way, despite the avalanche of legal and financial trouble certainly coming his way. For those individuals facing a similar predicament about speaking up, the signs strongly suggest major cracks in the Israeli army. While nothing is assured and censorship levels are reaching a fever pitch, these are moves of a desperate ideology. Freedom of speech was in many ways the foundation of our nation, featured prominently in Jefferson's Declaration as well as Madison's Constitution. We have allowed a foreign nation and its billionaire Zionist cohorts to circumvent, if not outright disregard, the sanctity of what we hold most sacred. Without our ability to speak our minds, whether as individuals, through the press, or via the separation of church or synagogue and state, especially in the face of tyranny, we cease to be a republic that holds any form of freedom. As Franklin once said, it may be our last chance to keep it. Since we now know we only have the illusion of a constitutional republic, it is time to start working collectively as a United States of America against those very forces of tyranny before it's too late. And if you want to check that out, I wrote this earlier today for our Substack. And this, in many ways, ladies and gentlemen, is the essence of the very problem that we're dealing with here when it comes to this state. And in so many ways, I give a tip of the hat to somebody like Netanyahu because they throw it right at you. It becomes way too obvious on a regular basis that they really are not nuanced in their strategy. They make it too obvious what they're trying to accomplish. Disintegration of what we hold sacred in our country. Our constitutional rights have been eroded and then some, all at the behest of those within our corporate infrastructure in conjunction with the Zio state. And that is why we have to talk about this on a regular basis. Whether at home or abroad, the problem becomes more and more profound. And I want to give, as I said, a lot of credit to Kristof because we can see that even slightly getting out of line becomes great risk for anybody, financially, socially, politically. There is great risk involved. And that is one of the primary reasons why people don't speak up. It isn't because they don't necessarily have the same feelings that we do about all that's been going on. I think in many respects they do have those same feelings. But what we know with absolute certainty is that the smoke signals are still being sent out, probably harsher than normal, especially in light of what these stories are, because rape culture is something that really plays on the sympathies of the affluent in this country. The affluent don't like it. And they know that if there is any hint of honesty with what this is being described as, which of course it is, it hurts the Zionist cause even more. And they cannot afford to lose ground with people who control the money supply, which I think more than anything else is their great fear. And if you haven't smashed that like button, guys, please make sure that you do. Again, as you can see, we are being heavily suppressed by the algorithm this evening. So any help you can provide is tremendously appreciated. And then, if nothing else, you make this a lawsuit. You want to make this a lawsuit because somebody decided to actually cover crimes, these crimes against humanity. These crimes against humanity are very real. But I also want to share with you one small little story. I'm not going to say the person's name, but let's just say that I still know of these people in South Florida that are fully on board with the state of Israel. And so I'm going to read you a very small snippet from somebody who I call this person a pick-me person, because they constantly want to get the approval of those in the establishment because they're desperate to be relevant. For much of my life, I have used my voice to advocate for women, for bodily autonomy, for survivors, and for the belief that women deserve safety, dignity, and to be heard. The commitment cannot be conditional. It cannot be depend on politics, identity, religion, or whether acknowledging someone's pain feels complicated in a broader geopolitical conversation. Speaking out against sexual violence against Jewish women anywhere at a time where anti-Semitism is at a rise, with an almost 350% increase in the last 5 years in our country, is not just the right thing to do, but it is the only thing we must all feel called to do. Reading the recent reporting and investigations surrounding these attacks was devastating. Sexual violence should never be minimized, excused, ignored, or treated as acceptable collateral in any conflict. If we cannot speak clearly in condemning rape and violence against women, then we undermine the very principles we claim to stand for. At a time when women's rights and bodily autonomy are being challenged here at home, and violence against women remains alarmingly pervasive worldwide, I believe we have a responsibility to be unequivocal. Rape is abhorrent. Sexual violence is abhorrent. Survivors deserve acknowledgement, humanity, and compassion. Women subjected to sexual violence deserve to be acknowledged, believed, and mourned always. Enough is enough. In my home, we believe all women, always, because we simply can't afford to do less. Well, needless to say, this person in question does not think anything of Palestinian people. In fact, I pay attention to what she posts, and of course she says nothing. Did she say anything about Kristof's story? Of course not. This story that she's referring to is actually the CBS News op-ed from Barry Weiss's people saying that everything that happened on October 7th is true. Everything else is a lie, but that's true. And she is just one of many people, and she is a very proud shitlib. I mean, very proud. And that's why I've been telling you guys. The real danger here comes from the liberal side of politics. Yes, there is something to be said for decorum politics and how it dominates our daily lives. And this is no different. This is a decorum-focused individual who represents the mindset of a substantial portion of that part of the political spectrum. And that is why they are only telling one side of the story. They will not tell the full story. They can't tell the full story because it doesn't play into the narrative that they're seeking. This is also somebody who wants to be relevant in politics, desperate to be relevant in politics. And that's why they say things like this, completely disregarding reality, completely. And I highlight that story because it's one of many. And that is why we have to do what we do. We cannot stay silent about this, for if we do, we are no better, and it is getting so much worse.